You open the fridge, reach past everything else, and grab the pickle jar, because out of everything in there, this is the one that feels like a free pass. Crunchy, tangy, barely any calories, the snack you're allowed to have. So you eat a couple of spears standing at the counter, and you tell yourself you made the smart choice. Here's the part nobody prints on the front of the jar. That green glowing spear can carry more sodium in 3 bites than a handful of chips, a synthetic dye that Europe legally requires a warning label for an emulsifier that shows up in lab studies on gut inflammation. And in most jars on that shelf, 0 of the gut benefits people think they're buying. You didn't do anything wrong. The pickle did exactly what it was built to do: look like a health food while behaving like a preserved snack. And the strangest part? The brand marketed hardest as the clean, natural, fermented one, the jar you'd reach for specifically because you're trying to eat better, earns the #1 spot on this list. Every single fact in this video comes straight off the ingredient panel and the public record. No taste test, no opinion, just what's printed on the back, and what the companies would rather you skim past. Let's start at number 8. And work our way up to the one that betrays you the most. For years, the story was simple: fresh pickles good, jarred pickles fine, all of them basically vegetables in salt water. That story is out of date. Because here's the fork in the road that decides everything about a jar of pickles, and almost nobody checks it. A real pickle can be made 2 completely different ways. One is lacto-fermentation. Cucumbers sit in salt and water, and living bacteria slowly sour them, the same process behind sauerkraut and kimchi. That's the version with probiotics. The other way is faster and cheaper. Drop the cucumber in vinegar, add salt, add chemistry, and skip the living part entirely. It tastes sour. It looks the same. It has none of the gut benefits. Almost every jar on the main aisle is the second kind. And to be fair, vinegar pickles aren't dangerous, and found in a study is not the same as proven to harm you. The research on some of these additives is still ongoing. But you deserve to know which jar is which, because the label is built so you can't tell at a glance. Number 8. Number 8. Great Value Hamburger Dill Chips. Walmart's house brand. The $2 jar that ends up at every cookout, layered on every burger, in more American fridges than almost anything else on this list. Nobody buys this expecting health food. You buy it because it's cheap and it does the job. Fair. But cheap and clean are 2 different things, and this jar quietly proves it. 1 serving, just a few chips, runs about 390 milligrams of sodium. That's nearly 1/5 of the entire day's sodium the American Heart Association says to stay under, and nobody stops at a few chips on a burger. Flip it over, and the additive list reads like a lab order. Calcium chloride to fake the crunch, sodium benzoate to hold shelf life, polysorbate 80 an emulsifier, and then the tell, yellow 5 and blue 1. 2 synthetic dyes, mixed to hit that specific neon grocery store green. A cucumber brine the honest way turns a dull olive color. The glow is cosmetic. You're not looking at freshness, you're looking at paint. And here's the thing about the $2 jar. You don't actually know who made it. Great Value is a sticker. The factory behind it is a co-packer Walmart doesn't name, which means if something goes wrong, the one name that isn't on the jar is the one that made it. Hold that thought. It comes back. Number 7. Famous Dave's Signature Spicy Pickle Chips. A restaurant name you trust for barbecue, borrowed and slapped on a jar. That's the first thing to know. This is a licensed brand. The pit smoke reputation was built somewhere else. The jar is that reputation rented out to a pickle. And what's in it belongs to the barbecue condiment family, not the health food one. 350 to 400 milligrams of sodium and 5 to 8 grams of added sugar in a single serving. Salt and sugar together, engineered to make you reach back in. That combination isn't an accident. Sugar and sodium, stacked in one bite, is the oldest trick in the snack business, because each one hides the other. You taste heat and sweet. You don't taste the salt doing its work. Add sodium benzoate, calcium chloride, and the same yellow 5 for the color, and what's left is a snack wearing a side dish costume, fiery going down, nothing underneath it. And notice what a licensed name actually buys the company. It doesn't have to earn your trust. It rents a reputation the restaurant already built, then fills the jar as cheaply as any generic on the shelf. The pitmaster isn't checking this brine. The name on the front is doing the work the ingredients didn't. Number 6. Pickles. The fun one. Wickedly delicious, sweet heat, a cult following in the South, and genuinely, that flavor is addictive. The problem is how they get it. Each serving carries over 6 grams of added sugar and close to 400 milligrams of sodium. A small handful is already a quarter of your day's sodium ceiling. And that signature sweetness comes from cane sugar, corn syrup, and depending on the batch, high fructose corn syrup. Read that again. A pickle with corn syrup in the brine, a few spoonfuls straight from the jar, which is exactly how people eat these, and you've eaten as much sugar as a cookie sitting inside something you filed under vegetable. Here's a detail the label won't volunteer. For years, Pickles was Simms Foods, a small Alabama operation started in 1998 from a family recipe. In early 2024, it was bought by Fenwick Food Group. Still a good story on the jar. Just no longer the same owner telling it. A pattern you're going to see get louder as we climb. Number 5. Best Made Dill Pickles. And this is where it gets interesting, because Best Made is supposed to be one of the good ones. It's the Texas jar. Family-owned, genuinely, by the Dalton family, out of Fort Worth, the largest family-owned shelf-stable pickle maker in the country. That's the exact profile people reach for when they're trying to escape the big brands. Small, regional, family name on the label. So here's the uncomfortable part. It has the highest sodium on this entire list. A single spear can run 400 to 500 milligrams, depending on the variety. Eat a few during a meal, and you've cleared half your day's sodium before the main course. And the family recipe still leans on the same industrial toolkit as the giant's sodium benzoate and potassium sorbate for shelf life, calcium chloride for snap, and yellow 5 plus blue 1 for that unnaturally bright color. Family-owned tells you who cashes the check. It doesn't tell you what's in the brine. That's the lesson of number 5, and it's worth sitting with, because it's about to repeat with a name you trust even more. From here up, the jars stop looking cheap. The names get more familiar, the marketing gets more confident, and the gap between the front of the label and the back of it gets wider, not smaller. Number 4. Vlasic Original Dill. The stork, the crunch, the blue label that's been in the American fridge for generations. If you pictured a pickle when this video started, you probably pictured this jar. That familiarity is the whole trick. You don't inspect what you grew up with, so let's inspect it. Sodium. A single spear pushes toward 20% of your daily limit, and Vlasic's own labels carry yellow 5 for the color and sodium benzoate for the shelf. Here's the mechanism worth understanding on that last one. Sodium benzoate is generally fine on its own, but combine it with vitamin C, add heat and light, and it can form small amounts of benzene, a known carcinogen. The FDA has known this since 1990, and in testing around 2005, found beverages that formed at 1 as high as 87 parts per billion against a drinking water limit of 5. Pickles carry far less vitamin C than a soda, so the real-world risk here is low. I'm not telling you a jar of Vlasic contains benzene. I'm telling you the ingredient that can start that reaction is in the jar, printed right there, and most people have no idea what it is. And the stork? Vlasic hasn't been an independent little pickle company for a long time. It's owned by Conagra Brands, one of the largest packaged food conglomerates in the country, which picked it up in 2018. The heritage is real. The independence is a memory. Number 3. Mount Olive Kosher Dill. And I want to be completely fair to this one, because Mount Olive is, in one specific way, the most admirable company on this list. It's not owned by a conglomerate. It's privately held in an almost cooperative way, hundreds of shareholders, more than half of them employees or descendants of the townsfolk who literally rescued the company back in 1926. If you're rooting for the good guys, root for these guys. Which is exactly what makes number 3 so useful, because here's the point. Good ownership doesn't change the brine. The jar still carries around 280 milligrams of sodium a spear, still uses sodium benzoate, still adds polysorbate 80, and still tints itself with yellow 5. That polysorbate 80 is worth a second. It's an emulsifier, the kind of ingredient you'd expect in cosmetics, used here to keep everything looking consistent. In a 2015 study published in Nature, mice-fed dietary emulsifiers, including polysorbate 80, showed disrupted gut bacteria and low-grade inflammation. That's mice, not people, and the research is still developing, but it's the kind of ingredient you'd never guess was in something marketed as fresh and tangy. The takeaway from Mount Olive isn't avoid the good company. It's that the system is the problem, not the company. Even the honest players are pouring from the same recipe, which brings us to the ones that pretend hardest. Because the next 2 jars aren't the cheap ones or the honest ones, they're the premium ones. The jars you upgrade to specifically because you think you're buying the real thing. Number 2. Claussen Kosher Dill, the refrigerated one. Never heated, always chilled. The pickle you buy when you want to skip the shelf and get something that tastes like the deli. It costs more, it lives in the cold case, and everything about it whispers fresh and fermented. Here's the reversal. Claussen is not fermented. Being refrigerated has nothing to do with fermentation. It's a temperature, not a process. Claussen is brined in vinegar, not soured by living bacteria, which means 0 live probiotics. None of the gut benefit the cold case implies. You are paying a premium for the look of the old-fashioned crock and getting salt water with cucumber texture. Run the math on that premium. You're often paying more per ounce than the shelf-stable jars 2 aisles over for fewer live cultures than a single spoonful of plain yogurt, which is to say, none at all. The cold case isn't selling you fermentation, it's selling you the feeling of it, and charging extra for the feeling. And the label backs it up. Calcium chloride, polysorbate 80, potassium sorbate, and then a phrase that sounds reassuring, and isn't, natural flavors. By law, natural flavor only means the compound started from a natural source. It can still be a lab-engineered mix. Natural doesn't legally mean simple. To Claussen's credit, it skips the yellow 5 that most of this list leans on, but skipping the dye doesn't make it the fermented deli pickle the cold case is selling you. And who owns this premium promise? Kraft Heinz. The exact kind of mass-market machine, the always chilled, never heated branding, is designed to make you forget. Number 1. Bubbies bread and butter chips. And if that name surprises you, that's the whole point. Because Bubbies is the brand people trust when they've given up on all the others. It's the one in the natural foods aisle, the one praised for being old-fashioned and genuinely fermented, the one you buy, specifically because you did your homework, and this was supposed to be the clean answer. And for their kosher dills, that reputation is earned. Real fermentation, simple brine. The bread and butter chips are a different jar wearing the same halo. Each serving carries up to 7 grams of sugar, mostly cane sugar and concentrated fruit juice, plus around 300 milligrams of sodium. Most people eat several slices at once, so that adds up fast. And here's the mechanism that makes it worse than a regular sweet pickle. The jar says fermented, but the added sweeteners feed and unbalance the very bacteria fermentation is supposed to build. You reach for the probiotic health food and get something closer to a dessert that's actively working against the benefit you came for. That's 2 hard strikes on the record. The sugar is on the label, and the sugar undermines the one thing this jar is trusted for. And the trust itself has quietly changed hands. The Bubbies people fell in love with was built over decades by the Gray family. In 2022, the brand was acquired by Fermented Food Holdings. The name on the jar is the same. The reason you trusted it may not be. Nowhere on this list is the gap between what you think you're buying and what's actually in the jar wider than right here at the one you chose because you were trying to be careful. Pause the countdown for a second, because none of this is an accident, and once you see the shape of it, you can't unsee it. Walk the pickle aisle, and it looks like a dozen competing families. The stork, the Texas name, the Boston backyard story, the deli jar. Now pull the ownership thread. Vlasic is Conagra. Claussen is Kraft Heinz. Bubbies is Fermented Food Holdings. Pickles is Fenwick. The $2 house brand is an unnamed co-packer. Even the scrappy underdog you'll meet in a minute got bought by a bakery empire. The aisle isn't a dozen families, it's a handful of holding companies wearing a dozen faces. And the thing they almost all share isn't a parent company. It's the shortcut. Real fermentation takes time, space, and living bacteria you can't rush. Vinegar, salt, and shelf-life chemistry take an afternoon. So the industry standardized on the fast version, then spent the marketing budget making it look like the slow one. The crock imagery, the deli fonts, the neon green dye standing in for the color real fermentation never produces. And the law lets them, because the standard of identity for a pickle only asks that it be made mostly from cucumbers and brought to a certain acidity. It never asks whether anything's alive. The system isn't lying to you, it's just built for speed, and speed leaves the living part off the label. And here's the tell that the system knows. It's already backing away from its own ingredients. In January of 2025, the FDA revoked its approval of red dye number 3 in food a color it had allowed for decades after it was linked to cancer in animal studies. California passed a law banning that dye and 3 other additives outright. West Virginia went further and moved to ban 7 synthetic dyes, including the yellow 5 sitting in half these jars, though a federal judge paused that one after the dye industry sued to stop it. Read that sequence again. The regulators and the courts are now openly fighting over ingredients that are, today, still in the pickle jar in your fridge. The label didn't change. The science did. Which is why you should ignore the test that went around online. Maybe you saw it. Picklegate. People flipping jars and panicking that the word pickle isn't printed anywhere on the label, treating a missing word like a smoking gun. It isn't one. The FDA doesn't require the word pickle at all. Dill, spears, chips, kosher, every one of those legally counts as the product's name. A jar that doesn't say pickle is following the rules, not hiding a secret. The missing word tells you nothing. The ingredient list tells you everything, and that's the panel the viral test trains you to walk right past. So what actually clears the bar? Not the biggest name, not the priciest jar. The ones that pass are simply the ones hiding the least judged by the exact same three things that sank everyone above. No cosmetic dyes, no shelf-life chemistry you need a chemist to read, and honesty about fermentation. First, Grillos. Fresh, refrigerated, and a genuinely short label. Cucumbers, garlic, dill, sea salt, vinegar. That's it. No yellow 5, no benzoate, no polysorbate 80, no neon glow. By ingredient, it's one of the cleanest jars on the shelf. Two honest caveats, because you'd catch them anyway. Grillos is vinegar brined, not fermented, so it's clean, but it's not a probiotic. And that Boston backyard founder story? Grillos was acquired in 2021 by the group behind King's Hawaiian. The jar is still clean. You just deserve to know the underdog has a very large owner now. Second, and the actual winner, Olive My Pickle. This is the one that passes on both counts. Its brine is only sea salt and filtered water. No vinegar, no sugar, no preservatives, which means it's truly lacto-fermented, the slow way, with the live bacteria intact. It's small and family-run, and it's doing the thing the entire aisle spent its marketing budget imitating. Tangy because it's alive, not because it's been dyed to look that way. And because it's actually fermented, it answers the one question the whole aisle spends its packaging dodging. Are the live cultures the product, or just a picture on the front? Here they're the product. That's the exact test that failed everyone above held to their own labels. They couldn't say yes to a single one of the three. No cosmetic dye, no chemistry you can't pronounce, real fermentation. This jar says yes to all three. Notice the winner isn't a better brand. It's a jar that skipped every shortcut the others took. 3 things you can check tonight. No lab required. 1. The dye test. Flip the jar and scan the ingredients for a color. Yellow 5, blue 1, any number. A real fermented pickle is a dull, drab olive green. If it glows, that green was added, and it's telling on itself. 2. The fermentation test. Refrigerated is not fermented. Look for the actual words. Fermented, lacto-fermented, live cultures, and check the brine. If you see vinegar listed, it's brined, not soured, and there are no live probiotics in that jar, no matter how cold the shelf was. 3. The sodium math. Take the milligrams per serving, then multiply by how many spears you actually eat, not the one the label pretends is a portion. That real number is the one your body deals with. And while you're at it, drop 4 myths. Refrigerated means fermented? No. Claussen sits cold and never ferments a thing. Natural flavors are natural? Legally, that phrase can still be a lab-made compound. Family-owned means clean? Best made is family-owned and carries the most sodium and 2 dyes. And the big one, pickles are just a low-calorie vegetable, so it doesn't matter what's in them? The calories were never the problem. The sodium, the dyes, and the shortcut where the probiotics should be, that's the problem, and none of it shows up on the calorie line you were checking. So here's what you can read off any pickle jar now, in about 10 seconds. You know lacto-fermentation is the only version with probiotics, and that a cold shelf doesn't prove it happened. You know vinegar in the ingredients means brined, not soured, no live cultures. You know yellow 5 is cosmetic, and that Europe requires a warning label on it after a 2007 study on children. You know polysorbate 80 is an emulsifier with unsettled gut research behind it. You know sodium benzoate plus vitamin C, heat, and light is the benzene reaction the FDA has tracked since 1990. You know the standard of identity never asks whether the pickle is alive, so the missing word on the label means nothing, and the ingredient list means everything. And you know the aisle full of families is mostly a few holding companies: Conagra, Kraft Heinz, Fermented Food Holdings, wearing a dozen faces. The whole model runs on one assumption, that you'll trust the front of the jar and never turn it around. That assumption just expired. You can read the confession on the back now, and it's printed in plain English. If seeing the aisle this clearly was worth it, send this to the person who keeps buying the #1 jar because they think it's the healthy one. They're the one who most needs to turn it around.